And how do you get to like practice a kind of a decolonial medicine? Because I know how you are interested about decolonial topics in everything you do. If you travel, you want to have a decolonial experience, right? So I know how you apply all your decolonial look in your blackness in what you do. So how do you get to practice this decolonial medicine and focusing on the access of also Black families and Black women into this realm of fertilization?
Right. I mean, there's so many biases. Like I said, there's a lot of racism in medicine. And so a lot of times, Black women and women of color are not even offered fertility care services because the bias is that we are very fertile. And it's actually the contrary. We're actually more likely, at least in the US, it's hard for me to know the stats in Brazil, but in the US and potentially in Europe, in Germany, we don't even quantify or classify race, so it's hard to know. But in the US and in the UK, there's definite reports that Black women tend to have lower birth rates, they tend to have lower success, and they tend to have more barriers to success. So they tend to have more diagnoses like fibroids, like endometriosis, like adenomyosis. And so what happens is that you don't get referred early enough. And when you don't get referred early, you don't get treatment early. When you don't get treatment early, your chances are lower.
Hi there, and welcome to Caos Parte, or in Portuguese, A Particular Chaos. If you're just tuning in for the first time, I'm so glad you are here. This is episode number 26, and today we are doing something a little different, a special bilingual edition in English and Portuguese. Here on the show, I share stories and reflections about women, especially mature women who are entering a new phase in life, women who are exploring their journeys, passions, and multiple potentialities. A kind of chaos, yes, but a beautiful, unique, and empowering one. Not the messy kind, but the kind that comes from being multidimensional, multipotential, with many sides and interests, yet still whole, still ourselves as we step into fuller maturity. I'm Noemia Colonna, I'm 51, and ever since I started preparing myself for this new stage of life, I've been looking back on my story with a little more kindness and curiosity. Along the way, I've realized just how many passions, roles, and interests I have cultivated and continue to cultivate. That journey led me to rediscover myself as a multipotentiality. I'm also a journalist who loves listening to and telling the stories of women who have transformed their lives in meaningful ways. Women who inspire me and I hope inspire you too. Let me tell you a little story. I became a mother at 30, but before that, I had a miscarriage. And after my son was born, who is now 20, I tried to become a mother again. Twice. Once at 40 and again at 42. But it didn't work out. I had two more miscarriages. The dream of being a mother as a second time stayed with me for years, but the pain of losing three pregnancies that left a deeper mark. Eventually, I came to accept that motherhood for me would mean having one child, and I made peace with that. Back when I was 30 and then again at 40, I faced fertility challenges. But my partner and I chose not to dive deeper, no testing, no treatments. We simply moved on. Sometimes I think about how much I grieved not being able to have a second or third child. And I wonder about the deep emotional and physical pain women experience when they try again and again to become mothers, whether naturally or through assisted reproduction like EVF. And still, it doesn't happen. That pain is hard to measure, truly. But what many of us don't know is that fertility isn't just about reproduction. It is also a powerful indicator of a woman's overall health, from the first period to menopause. Fertility, or the lack of it, can tell us a lot about what's happening in our bodies. And if we could understand our ovarian reserve earlier in life, we might be able to predict and even prevent health issues down the road, like heart disease, stroke, or even Alzheimer's. That's why, in today's episode, I'm talking to a woman who deeply understands this topic and is doing groundbreaking work in science and women's health. Let me introduce you to Dr. Lynae Brayboy. Lynae is a brilliant 45 years old Black physician and researcher with an impressive background in reproductive endocrinology, gynecology, obstetrics, adolescent medicine, and more. She's someone who listens closely to women's bodies, not just to support fertility, but to protect their hearts and minds as they age. And today, you will get to meet her, my dear friend, right here in Berlin. Originally from Florida, Lynae is a powerhouse of innovation in women's health. In 2019, she moved to Berlin with her teenager daughter, who is now a young adult, and became a visiting professor at Charité, one of Germany's top hospitals in the neuropediatrics department. She also co-founded an IVF clinic called Um Care, based here in Berlin with a branch in Lisbon. The clinic uses artificial intelligence to help improve women's access to successful fertility treatments and family building journeys. And outside of the lab, well, Lynae is just Lynae, as inspiring. She loves flower shows, potted gardening, cooking, sustainable fashion, and traveling the world to have real, authentic experience. Oh, and on top of that, she speaks English, German, and is learning Portuguese. So let's dive into this important conversation with the incredible Dr. Brayboy, or as I like to call her, Lynae. So welcome to my particular chaos.
Thank you so much for that lovely intro. I think it was like a year ago, I think, that you found out that I was the physician. Is that right?
Yes, completely. I know you like pretty much 5 years.
4 or 5 years, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and only 1 year ago, I found you were a physician. So that's you. You are this simple person, this close friends, this woman who never carry your titles, right?
No.
But
I was Lynae before, I'll always be Lynae after.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about this. How do you get to put yourself first before your titles?
Yeah, I think being 45 and having that maturity and hindsight, the titles are just titles. You know, the essence of you is what you wake up for every day. What makes you you is not the education, it's not the degrees, it's not the accolades, it's not the diplomas. That's all nice. I'm not poo-pooing it. If you're studying and you're listening to this, keep studying. I think education is really important, but I think it's not everything. And people become very attached to those titles, especially, as you know, in Germany, everybody goes by their titles. And so Frau Doktor this and, Herr Doktor das. And I think that's great, but to me, that doesn't make up all of me. It's a component of who I am, but not everything. So,
Completely.
Yeah.
And Lynae, how did you become a doctor? Why did you choose medicine? And how?
Yeah. Well, it's a fantastic story, actually. My grandmother was very much part of my life as a kid, and my parents both had full-time jobs in another city. And so they were often gone, and a lot of the childcare, for me anyhow, fell to my grandparents. And I think my grandmother was 60-something when I was born, and my grandfather was probably 80-something when I was born.
Wow.
And so these were my first friends, right? So I kind of thought I was their age. I didn't really appreciate that I was a child and they were adults. And they sort of included me in all of their conversations, their work life, their social life. And so my grandmother was a nurse. She worked at a university called Eckerd College in our town, and she worked at the university clinic. And so as a 5 and 6-year-old after school, I have pictures of myself in my little uniform going to work with my grandmother. And, at that time, a kid could roam, without the fear that we have in the US now. And so I would roam around the university, roam around the clinic, play with the skeleton, look at the pamphlets that were in the waiting room. And often these pamphlets were about STIs. At the time, they were called sexually transmitted diseases. I read about syphilis. I read about, genital warts. This is me as a 5 and 6-year-old.
Wow.
And my grandmother had a very good relationship with the doctor who was a family doctor, Dr. Riley, at the clinic. And he would let me listen to his heart and use his stethoscope. And I thought, this is cool. This is what I want to be. And so I was always kind of gravitating towards science and medicine, but I also really liked science. So I just started, I think, studying biology just naturally. I love everything that's biology. I love everything that's earth science. I love everything that's oceanography. And so it was just very natural for me to want to be a physician. And when I got to college, I started to question it a bit. I said, do I really want to do this? Because all I saw a physician be in my hometown was go to med school, go to residency, open up a practice, and, move down the street. And I didn't want to do something typical. And I didn't want to work in a hospital. I thought I wanted to do something very different. And so I wanted to be an MD PhD, which is very different. And it's a different program of study, and it's much longer. And I decided, though, to take a year off to decide. And I took a year off and I went abroad. I did something called Fulbright. And that Fulbright was in the Republic of Mali. And so I studied placental malaria there, which is when women who are pregnant get malaria, which is endemic to the area in West Africa.
Oh, my God.
And so I was in charge of biopsying the placenta, which is the afterbirth that comes out after a woman delivers. And so this is how I got hooked on women's health, because I saw so much there. And I said, I want to still be a part of this. So that's why I decided on my way back to the US, I would go to medical school and actually become a doctor after all.
Fabulous. And you are only 45 years old and having such an amazing experience. But how it was being a kind of a minority, even in college, because of course, I don't know, in Brazil, it's not so common to see so many Black physicians, especially those ones specialized in fertilization, biology, and everything. So how did you face it? And tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, well, actually, I wasn't a minority in college. I went to a historically Black college and university, which means it was about 98% African American, or people from the African diaspora. And this is unique and within the United States, is that we have, after the end of slavery, of legal slavery, let's put it like that, there was then a period of Reconstruction, that was supposed to occur. So you may have heard of the term 40 acres and a mule. That's Spike Lee's, I think, name of his company. That was what every single person was supposed to get who was formerly enslaved, and we never got it. But what we did get were land grant schools, meaning that schools were set up to educate those who were formerly enslaved. And so most of the historically Black colleges and universities were beneficiaries of those land grants. So my school was called Florida A&M University, Agricultural and Mechanical. And we were given a land grant, and the land that we were given was infested with rattlesnakes. And so they gave us the worst land, which is typical, right? But we took that, deficit and made it our mascot. And so we're called rattlers, or rattlesnakes, so rattlers for short. And our motto is, we will strike, strike, and strike again. So if you try to hurt us, we will keep striking you until you die, essentially.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
So it became our motto. It's actually something that's said at our football games. It's something that is really, really important to every FAMUan. And it's called the family. So, if you meet another FAMUan, this is how you greet each other, with a rattlesnake greeting. And so I wasn't a minority. It was actually the first time that I wasn't a minority in my entire life. And it was a beautiful 4 years of just feeling surrounded. I'm friends with people that I was friends with at that time. So then when I went to university for medical school, I went to a different school, because it's different in the U.S. You do a 4-year undergraduate degree, then you go to medical school. then I was a minority again.
By hearing you, Lynae, I just realized how important it is to have this kind of role models, right? And be surrounded by the diversity, especially in such a field that you were, because
Yes.
even if you didn't feel so, you didn't face so many differences in your school or in your medical schools, then you become a professional, you become an authority on your field, on academia as well, because you are a researcher, right?
That's right.
And
That's less Black, definitely.
yeah, see, and then at any point in your life, you will face the word minority. Yeah, but having these role models before, including your grandma, right? Just I feel like it gives you a kind of endurance and empowerment, resilience to face this environment of being a minority, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I went from Temple to having that diversity to institution and hospital where there was no diversity. None of the attendings were Black. No one in leadership was Black. And the institution had been sued, actually, in a lawsuit for a discrimination that would happen. So I actually cried when I matched there. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to residency at a terrible place. But because they had hit rock bottom right before I got there, I knew that if anything happened, that there were systems and ways that I could, use if there was anything that happened. And nothing happened to me personally. I definitely saw things happen to other people, but it was good because I was empowered with the knowledge. And I knew when I was going there, the mindset of people at that institution. Definitely there's racism in medicine, just like every field. There's racism in biology. And, it was a double whammy for me because not only am I Black in a mostly female field, but I also had a baby. So when I came back from Mali, I found out I was pregnant. I had my daughter the first year of medical school, and I was by myself with her almost from the beginning. And so, I had a lot of people who just doubted me that I was able to sort of keep up with everybody else. They saw having a child as a handicap. And I think in actuality, it was something that inspired me to keep going and to also keep my mouth shut when came to times where I wanted to tell people off and where they could go. I couldn't do that because I knew I had to keep a job and keep my place in residency and keep going because I had someone who was counting completely and solely on me.
I love your story. We are sisters in a way that we identify our struggles. But of course, I can't help but feeling your pain,
When it was a lot of pain.
Yeah, when you told me that you got pregnant, which by at age, how old were you when you got pregnant?
I was 22, 23 when I had her. I think I was 20. Yeah, I was 23 when I had her. Yeah. So, I think that a lot of people, said, oh, well, she's a medical student. She should have known better. Or there's a lot of assumptions that happen. And actually reproduction, even in the medical field, is not well known. So I didn't really understand my menstrual cycle, how fertility worked, until I was a fellow. Okay. I would say most people who are non-OBGYNs really don't know how to do a pap smear, unless maybe they're family medicine and they do a little bit of women's health or they do a specialty in women's health. Many people are uncomfortable talking to adolescents, in pediatrics about sexually transmitted infections and vaccines that'll help prevent them from having cervical cancer through human papillomavirus. So, it's amazing, even within medicine and in science, how siloed and how marginalized women's health is. Yeah. So I didn't know about my menstrual cycle. I didn't know about, planning my family, right? And that's what almost never happens is that no one asks you, how many children do you want? I didn't know about the miscarriages that you just shared. And it is a grieving process because if you had been 25 and someone had said, oh, you want to have 3 kids, this is what you need to do. This is what we do at OVA. We say, how many children do you want to have? But oftentimes people get to us by the time they're in their 40s where it's much harder.
Yeah.
And our reproductive lifespan, as you so astutely said, it starts with our very first period. It ends with menopause, and we can't predict either. We can't predict when you're going to start your period and when your period's going to end, and how quickly that reproductive lifespan might end, how short it may be. And it is so important not only for having children, but again, as you stated, your overall health. The ovary is the first organ to age in a woman. We hope our brains and our kidneys and our livers continue to work throughout our lives. But the ovary, it basically has a finite expiration. And the ovary is there, yes, to give us the eggs that we need for fertility, but the ovary is also there to provide protection, as you said, to our hearts, our bones, potentially also our brains, our cardiovascular system. So it's really, really important that we understand more about the ovary. And we all come from someone's ovary. We are basically walking examples of our mothers and our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers' ovarian reserve and ovarian potential. And whatever, at least from my research and from the animal models that we've used, whatever your grandmother has been exposed to develops and manifests in you, potentially. This is not something we've done in humans yet, but the exposures, the stress, the racism, the trauma shows up in generations after generations because of mitochondria.
Yes, and speaking of which, stress and lack of resting they are such a topics that is so common and familiar to Black women, right? So I always think about the importance of rest for Black and brown women. And when I read about your story and or your work, towards this issue, I just want to know what can we, as Black women can do to prevent health issues related to our bodies, but considering the importance of resting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, at least in my tradition, the African American tradition from the South, my mother was very much, you work, you work, you work. A woman's work is never done. You don't have time to take a nap. You need to work. You need to do your chores. You need to this, you need to that. And it's actually been in my adulthood that I've learned to take a break, that I've learned that it's okay to rest when you're tired. I've learned that joy is important to include in your itinerary. And I think that's something that I made a conscious decision to do when I moved to Berlin. Before, my life surrounded or revolved, I should say, around work. Everything was work. And I think that makes you an intolerant person. That makes you an unhappy person. I think the stereotype of a doctor is sort of self-important, sort of, sort of patriarchal. I tell you what to do, you do it. I prescribe this, you take it. There's less conversation. Well, if you think about the life of a doctor, everyone thinks, oh, doctors have it made. They make a lot of money. It's actually a stressful life in the United States.
Yeah.
We have a high suicide rate among physicians. And, during the pandemic, I know it was extremely acute. And I decided that I'm not going to go down that road. I'm going to go down the road of joy and happiness and longevity. Because, I take pride in people thinking, oh, you must be in your 30s. Nope, I'm 45 and I'm proud of it. I do have gray hair, but I've earned them. And I'm very excited to be aging gracefully as opposed to aging and trying to cover up something. I'm aging well because I'm aging with a good diet, hopefully enough rest, enough joy in my life, and also just being in a place where, I have less fucks to give. And I think before I was trying to please people or to appear as a certain way or be a certain way. And I'm sort of past that in my life now. And so, I think I'm happiest when I'm around genuine, authentic people who want to make the world a better place. And I'm not interested in being around people who are insecure and who project their insecurities, who are control freaks, who want to dominate. And that's unfortunately a path that a lot of physicians go down because it's easy, right? It's easy to kind of go down that path.
Yeah.
And I, to all my people who are listening who want to go into medicine or those who are in medicine, just because that is your reality today doesn't mean you have to stay there. Your reality can change.
Of course.
And I'm so glad that
totally.
mine did, because living in the U.S. was not going to keep me, I think, in a place of joy.
And why did you come to Berlin?
Yeah, a couple reasons. So I studied mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell in human eggs and also other mammalian eggs. And these mitochondria are super unique. We get all of our mitochondria from mom. So your son is more related to you than he is to his father. Okay.
For the good and bad.
For the good and bad.
So when he does good things, it's me.
It's
when
me.
he does bad things, it's his father.
Exactly. But he has all of your mitochondria, just like my daughter has all of my mitochondria. I have all of my mother's mitochondria. I have all of my biological grandmother's mitochondria. And they're very interesting, but people don't really know about them in the human egg. We know about them in other cells, and we've reported about them in other cells, but not the human egg. But we all come from an egg. And it's crazy to me that we don't know more. So I started working on mitochondria, and on a whim, I decided to go to a meeting here in Berlin about mitochondria. And I made the decision like 2 days before. So people always say, oh, I don't do anything last minute. Don't do anything last minute. Sometimes last minute's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I was spontaneous. I booked the flight. I came to Berlin. I came to this conference, and I decided to look up a mentor from 20 years ago. So she was my first ever scientific mentor. And she happens.
Again, the role of mentorship, right?
That's right.
From
That's
the grandmother to everyone who
Yes.
appears to help us. That's amazing.
Yeah. So Constance is a professor, or she's just retiring actually, as a professor here at Freie Universität. And I decided to just look her up and say hi. And she was kind of like, what do you want? And I was like, I don't want anything. I'm just here for a conference, and thought I'd say hello. And then she agreed to meet me sort of reluctantly. And then we met for lunch, and she looked up all my papers, and she's like, oh my God, you're a scientist. I thought you went to medicine. And it was funny. It struck me as funny that a lot of scientists don't think that physicians are real scientists, that we're more clinical scientists and we don't think like a scientist. And so she was very struck by the fact that I was publishing, that I had grants. So I met her for lunch when I came to this conference here in Berlin. And she said to me, Lynae, you got to get out of there. Wherever you are, they're not supportive to you. From what you just said to me, that anyone who's gotten as many papers and as many grants, as many prizes as you have, and they're not supporting you, get out of there. And you should come to this sabbatical program in Berlin for scientists, and it's called Gain Time to Think. And I said, oh, okay.
But how did you feel when she told you such a thing?
I mean, I knew that, right? You look around, I felt it, I knew it, but I was sort of, I think we're trained as Black women to sort of get along no matter what, right? I mean, we had to survive, our ancestors had to survive the transatlantic slave trade. Our ancestors had to survive slavery and trauma and sexual assault and so many things. So we just continue to survive sometimes, right? Yeah. And I think I was in survival mode. I'm like, I'm going to keep staying here, even though I'm being talked about, even though everything I do is, kind of pushed down and not highlighted. I'm going to keep staying here until I get, this grant, and then I can leave. Or if I get this bigger grant, and then I'll be able to leave. And she was like, nope. Come here. Figure it out here in Berlin. So she said, I can't guarantee you'll get into the program because it's an application process, but here's the application, apply. So that was in October of 2018. And then in February of 2019, they interviewed me for the sabbatical. They invited me to come. I came, and it was heaven. I had already done like a 6-week program, Frontiers in Reproduction, at Woods Hole, where IVF was actually invented, the basic science for IVF. Everyone thinks of IVF with Louise Brown, who just celebrated her birthday last month. But IVF was already known about since the 1930s. It just wasn't translated to human health until the 1970s. So I had done a 6-week program there, and I thought, if I could just immerse myself in science, I can get ahead. And so this program was meant to be similar. And so they organized everything for us in terms of my daughter coming here, my dog coming here. They got us an Anmeldung, which if you're in Germany, you'll know how freaking hard that is to get.
Yeah, the nightmare of all expat immigrants. I
had a Steuernummer, which is the tax ID number that they helped us get. a bank conto, a giro conto, which also is hard to get, to kind of set us up. And I also started taking German lessons. And just for the audience, German is my fourth language. I actually speak English, French, Spanish, and German was the fourth language I needed to now learn.
Amazing.
Portuguese is now my fifth language I'm trying to learn.
Amazing. And did you have an idea when you arrived here? When did you get the idea to become an entrepreneur and to open the Ovon, your actual clinic and your big business, which you are, on top of this, you are a co-founder of a clinic specialized in fertilization, which is so fascinating. When did you get this idea to start a business here?
When I was here on my sabbatical, I started to hear about something called femtech. And I looked around to see, what is this femtech? Because it's not a word, a vocabulary word I had heard in women's health, and it's everything that surrounds women's health and tech. And so I got a job actually at Clue, which is really Ida Ten, who was one of the co-founders of Clue, coined the term femtech. And so I got a job at Clue as Clue's first ever chief medical officer. So I had already developed an app to teach girls about sex ed in the US, because what I didn't mention is I delivered a 12-year-old girl. So speaking of education and family planning, she was 11 when she got pregnant. She was 12 when she delivered. And everybody blamed her. Right, yes, of course. Not society for not teaching her, not our health teachers, not our mom, but her. And I felt that it was unfair because, girls get blamed for everything. Yeah. Right. But it takes two people to make a baby. Exactly. So I developed this app, and so I basically wrote to Clue and said, "Hey, I've got a background in this, in women's health. I've got a background in tech. I've worked in product development and content. This would be great." And so I didn't hear back, and I was a little bit miffed. I was like, "Oh, how could they not be beating down my door?" And I think this is where sometimes our ego cripples us. So I said, you know what? I'm going to send them some articles. Hopefully they get back to me. If it's meant to be, it'll work out. And sure enough, they got back to me, and I interviewed with Clue while I was still here on sabbatical. And then the day before I was meant to go back to the US, they offered me a job. So wow, I had a job. My daughter had a school. And so we were just going to go back to the US, close everything up, pack, come back right away. But then COVID happened. So I got stuck in the US for 6 months. Because everything shut down. So I was in the US for 6 months. I was praying that I would still have a job here in Berlin. And then Germany was doing much better with the pandemic than the rest of the world. So my visa continued to be processed here in Germany. I started in the US, but it continued to be processed here. Mm-hmm. They basically told us you have to be in Berlin by the 1st of July, 2020. And if you don't make it before the EU closes its borders to Americans, we can't guarantee you entry nor your job.
Wow.
So I left my car at the airport. My dog and my daughter and I, we got on the plane with as much as we could pack in our suitcases and just came because we were not willing to stay in the U.S. during that very, very dark time. And so we got here. I worked for Clue for 2.5 years. It was a great 2.5 years. I learned a lot about working in a startup and how to use Slack, how to use Google Docs, how to use all the things, right? And so I did that for 2.5 years. And the project that I was hired for actually ended up being nixed. So they took the product off the market. And so everyone who was associated with that product also was let go. And just before that started to happen, I was on LinkedIn because the first wave of firings, unfortunately, one of my colleagues got fired. And so I was determined to help her find another job because she came out of maternity leave, as you know, in Germany, which is really good.
Yeah. 1 year, right? 1 year.
It can be 2, but it's better than the U.S. People might say in Germany it's not great, but you get nothing guaranteed in the U.S. So she came out of maternity leave to work for Clue, and I was part of that team that interviewed her, so I felt culpable, actually, that she was now losing the job with, before her probate site, so no severance, nothing. And so I was on LinkedIn helping her find a job, and I saw an advertisement, fertility tech stealth searches for co-founder, chief medical officer. And I thought, what is this?
Oh my God, it's stroke a chord.
So I reached out and I had a conversation with Felicia. I didn't know who Felicia was. I didn't know at the time. I don't know if she knows the story, but I didn't know she was the admin person. I didn't know who she was. So I just talked to her like I would have talked to anybody. And turns out she was the co-founder who was actually looking for a co-founder.
Fantastic.
So that's how we started talking, and that's how we started co-creating together.
Lynae, I can see how creative, innovative you are because you are a person with a huge open-minded. So how do you get to juggle with so many things? For example, today is a Sunday. You are in Berlin for a miracle.
I know, right? Unusually.
Yeah. And then you have Mojo, your dog.
Yes.
You have your daughter that today is in Australia, right? But
no,
still,
she's here. She's here. She's in Berlin now.
She's here, And then you have your friends. You have our social life because I believe that every month, at least every month, we get to meet each other.
We do.
Right?
We do. I mean, it's sad when we have a month that goes by and we're not together. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you get to do this? I know I'm a multipotential as well, but I want to know your secret and on top of this, and you still get to be this wonderful, beautiful, gorgeous woman. So tell me the secret.
Well, I think it's a beautiful chaos, right? I mean, that's the whole point is that, no, my days are not the same. Every day is a little different. When I'm in Portugal, it's a different vibe than when I'm in Berlin. When I'm in the US, it's a completely different vibe. I think I enjoy it. There was a time when I had to answer to someone else and do someone else's projects and do someone else's, wishes. And I don't have that anymore. So while it's, stressful and sometimes difficult to balance, the beauty of being an entrepreneur is that you can solve the world's problems the way you want to. And you can do it with the people that you think that are passionate about that. And I think we have a great team. We have a Berlin-based team, we have a Portugal-based team, and we also have people who are outside of the EU. And I think that everybody has started to become part of Ovum because they want to make a difference. They want to have an impact. Our investors also are people who are interested in impact, social impact. And it's not about just helping people have IVF. It's about helping more people have IVF because a lot of people who need IVF don't get access. The overwhelming majority of people who need IVF care can't have it because of resources, because of lack of access to fertility physicians. And the good thing about tech and artificial intelligence is that we can expand what we can do. Instead of having a doctor be so efficient with the traditional tools and you having to go to the doctor's office, you can start your journey with us, just like you and I are speaking here. So you don't have to take off work. You can be on your lunch break and have a discussion with us so that hopefully you're not waiting until you're 40 to come to us. Hopefully you can afford to come to us when you're 30 or when you're 25, because everyone's family planning needs and fertility challenges or advantages will be different.
Yeah, and it's so, so important, especially when we think about Black women who don't have access to this kind of service, fertilization. And how do you get to practice a kind of a decolonial medicine? Because I know how you are interested about decolonial topics in everything you do. If you travel, you want to have a decolonial experience, right?
Noemia knows this from
I know these details because I was planning my trip to Tanzania and Kenya, and you gave me the most important trick. You said, Noemia, go for this to have a very genuine Black African experience there.
Yes.
So I know how you apply all your decolonial look in your Blackness in what you do. So how do you get to practice this decolonial medicine and focusing on the access of also Black families and Black women into this realm of fertilization?
Right. I mean, there's so many biases. Like I said, there's a lot of racism in medicine. And so a lot of times Black women and women of color are not even offered fertility care services because the bias is that we are very fertile. And it's actually the contrary. We're actually more likely, at least in the US, it's hard for me to know the stats in Brazil, But in the U.S. and potentially in Europe, in Germany, we don't even quantify or classify race, so it's hard to know. But in the U.S. and in the U.K., there's definite reports that Black women tend to have lower birth rates. They tend to have lower success, and they tend to have more barriers to success. So they tend to have more diagnoses like fibroids, like endometriosis, like adenomyosis. And so what happens is that you don't get referred early enough. And when you don't get referred early, you don't get treatment early. When you don't get treatment early, your chances are lower. And instead of just speaking to people about contraception, which we need both, we need conception and contraception together. And so a lot of programs traditionally, especially in Africa on the continent or in South America, have pushed only contraception. And what really should always be the question when you go to your OBGYN or to your family medicine doctor, it should be one key question. Do you want to get pregnant in the next 12 months? Yes or no? It should be that, not, oh, let me give you a prescription for birth control.
Yeah.
Or assume that you have enough children because you already have 3.
Don't have kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too much. Yeah.
Yeah. So
definitely.
It's taking that assumption away and trying to provide free education for everyone. And, obviously what we do costs money and there is a cost involved, but we also offer financing because we don't want it to be that someone has to go into their savings or borrow something from their friends just to have fertility care. Now, that may also be the case, but we try to make it accessible as possible, right?
Yeah.
So that if you don't have all the funds all at once, you can either do the financing, pay it in installments before you start care. And that allows people to have access. I mean, I didn't have access even as a doctor. I couldn't have paid to go privately and freeze my eggs because you talked about wanting to have another child. I wanted to have another child, but I wasn't dating anyone. I didn't even have a partner. What was I going to do? I could have frozen eggs, but I would have had to pay thousands and thousands of dollars and take off lots of time to go to the clinic that I wasn't working at and have my eggs frozen. It just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
And my co-founder, Felicia, same thing for her. I mean, she was told by her OBGYN when she got her AMH results, oh, it doesn't look good for you, just get a puppy, ha, ha, ha. This is the type of crap that, we don't really need to hear as women. We know what we want, and sometimes we need to have a physician who's willing to listen to us and go that extra step, that extra mile for us. And those are the type of physicians that we've employed at Ovum Care, who are empathetic, who will listen, who are also multilingual. They speak English and Portuguese.
Yeah.
And then, and Portugal is just our first clinic, right? We chose Portugal because of multiple reasons. We're actually in Cascais, about 20 minutes from Lisbon. And we chose it because it's the most liberal politic when it comes to reproduction in the EU.
Wow, really?
Really. They have what I would say, compared to the country we live in, Noemia, some of the best laws. So you can do egg donation, you can do sperm donation, you can choose your own egg donor and sperm donor. In some countries in the EU, you can't. The doctor chooses for you.
Wow.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And they often will choose a donor that is the same skin color, eye color, hair color as you, although that may not be your preference. And I would say that's already one thing to decolonize reproduction.
Totally. Yeah.
Choice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember back in the day when I got my last miscarriage, I asked it to the doctor, why is it happening? She said, well, you can spend a lot of money to find, or you just try again. And I did. And it was completely painful. So much so that my partner said, please, no, let's stop here. Doesn't pay off, so stop it. And I was 40 years old. Maybe I could have the chance to find out what is going on as the research you do today. And I could have my second or third child, right?
Yeah.
So this lack of access or empathy, especially with Black women, when it comes to reproduction and fertilization issue. And I see the same applies to menopause as well.
That's true.
How
it
many Black
everything.
Women? Yeah, how many Black women has access to the hormone therapy, especially in Brazil, which is more my reality. Here in Berlin, I have a super easy access. Like I'm doing now hormone therapy now, and every time I get my bottle, I said, But it's like my insurance just charged 10 euros for this bottle. And my quality of life is just growing and growing, growing. And I think about the Black women in Brazil that don't have this access.
Right.
So what can we do as a physician,
I think even as just non-physicians, advocacy for oneself. And I think that's really the beauty of having your data at the palm of your hand. So, working for Clue, I learned about how important tracking is. At Ovum, you can take your data elsewhere, right? Let's say you now go into menopause and you want to say, well, this is what my cycle was like before, and this is what my mood was like before, and then I had these pregnancies, and then this is what happened. You can tell your own story.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard, no matter what type of woman you are, is to tell your own story. And you can't argue with data, right? So if people show up with, this is what I've tracked, this is what was happening when I was having periods, this is what happened now when I've stopped having periods, and this is not okay. And you say, and I would like to be treated because this is what's happening in my life. It could be, sexual dysfunction. It could be pain with intercourse. It could be, night sweats, hot flushes or hot flashes as they're called. It could be a myriad of things, brain fog. And, we deserve to have a good life because menopause is a special time. People always focus on the fertility and the pregnancy, and that is important, but that's just one aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
And in Ovum, we really want to be able to, in the future, take care of people from puberty all the way through menopause because it's a beautiful chaos after your periods end, because now there's no more chance of pregnancy. So it eliminates that stress. Okay.
Yeah.
It eliminates also too the fear I think people have of either not getting pregnant or getting pregnant. Right. And so that's number one. But number two, I think it's also you're into this time where you can sort of, as you're doing, Noemi, look back on your life and appreciate the things that you went through. The fact that we made it through puberty. Puberty is painful. Not everybody makes it through puberty.
Yeah.
We're in constant transition in our lives and women, and we're in constant cyclings, ebbs and flows, right? Just like the ocean. And we're in constant transition. And so if you can survive that transition, and then the transition into pregnancy is a transition. You're constantly, now you have something else that is growing in you that you have to keep alive. Then the transition after you deliver the baby. That's another transition that people don't think about. Your hair can fall out. You can have depression. You can have night sweats, right? Because you're withdrawing from these hormones that have now abruptly left your system with the delivery of the baby and the placenta. And then you're now transitioning, perhaps into breastfeeding, which is another transition. Like I wasn't ready for that at all. And so menopause is the final transition. There's no more ups and downs anymore. So it's actually something in some cultures, it's celebrated because now you have survived transition 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now you have now embraced this last tradition. And you don't have the same risks, okay? There are some people who have things like PCOS and endometriosis. They get better, actually, with the menopause.
Yeah.
So it's, people always, I think, poo-poo it. And, on Instagram, I was starting to see all this negative content about menopause. And I thought to myself, no, I reject that because menopause is actually the time where you can say, my body is mine. It's not for anybody else's. I'm not doing anything with my body except keeping it healthy and maintaining it. Before that time, my body belonged to my daughter and feeding her and keeping her alive. And so now, I think it's a beautiful thing to embrace. The other thing I think about menopause that we discount is that a lot of people know that there are challenges with menopause, and so they change their lifestyle. I've seen you change before my eyes in the last 4 to 5 years. Noemi has inspired me to start working out more frequently because with diet and exercise, she's transformed her body. And I don't know if that's something that came from menopause, but I think a lot of women are cognizant that weight gain can occur because your metabolism changes when you go into menopause. And so
it came completely out of menopause. I started to improve my quality life at the age of 48. I was completely lost. I said, okay, I have to be my own medicine now. And only now, 3 years after, now I know every problem I was facing by that time, it was also related to menopause symptoms that I didn't know. Just because I
Right.
paused it down, I
Mhm.
started to see myself and say, okay, now I know it is time to be the owner of my body, my time,
Yes,
my idea and my happiness. I
that's
completely
right.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, what a wonderful conversation, Lynae. I would spend hours and hours talking with you, as we do in the real life, right? So we
Yeah.
are arriving to the end of our
Oh.
conversation, which is a pity. But before, I'd like to
Hmm.
ask you about what does it mean being 45?
Oh.
What is maturity for you?
Uh-huh. Maturity is being happy in one's own skin. That's it. I'm happy the way I am when I wake up every day. And yeah, of course, there's some times where I'm like, oh, I don't fit into those jeans like I used to. Oh, yeah. I can't say that I'm like, perfectly everything, but I'm generally happy about what I've done, the choices I've made, the places I've gone, the experiences that I've had. I'm genuinely and generally happy about those things. And I think for if I could tell my younger self something is who cares what other people think? Who
Please stop.
cares?
Stop, because this is a question that I do to all my guests here. What
Uh-huh.
would you say to your younger 20 years old, Lynae? Especially that one pregnant.
Who was scared?
What?
Who was
Yeah.
very scared?
And
Yeah.
then what would you say to the Lynae of 90 years old?
Ooh. Now
Yeah.
that one's a different one. I would say to the 20-some-year-old Lynae who's alone in her apartment in Philadelphia, contemplating, oh my God, I can't do this. I need to, perhaps end my life even, is what I thought. It's going to be okay. Like, don't believe the naysayers. There's always going to be someone that's telling you, no, you can't, no, it's not going to work out. Forget about them and listen to yourself. And I think that would have given me more peace in that time. Fortunately, I got there, but things work out. I think if you have the right reason you're doing them, I think if you have a clean heart, a clean spirit, and you're really trying to do what's good and right, things will work out. And so, yeah, keep going, I would say. And then to my 90-year-old self,
Yeah.
I would say, I hope you have 3 hours a day gardening.
Oh, yeah, the way you
I,
like it.
yes. I hope you have butterflies that you can grow in your garden. I hope that you are traveling on your own. I hope that you are maybe have, 2 or 3 businesses that you've started by then. I hope that you have maybe grandchildren and bonus grandchildren and adopted grandchildren, and that that you're a resource for them, just like your grandmother was a resource for you. I hope that you've become a philanthropist and have donated some money to FAMU, and
Oh.
yeah, I hope that you're living your best life at 90,
Exactly the way you are doing now, except for the grandchildren.
except for the grandchildren. I'm not
Right,
raising them now.
Lynae is one of the best cooking towel, especially the Thanksgiving food. She's the expert one. My dear Lynae, it was such a joy having you here. Thank you so much for your presence.
Thank you, Noemia. Thank you. Obrigada.
Yeah, for making my Sunday a fun day. Obrigada,
Yes.
muito obrigada a você. This was the 26th episode of Caos, Parte, in English, A Chaos Apart. Today, I spoke with Lynae Brayboy, an American doctor and scientist specializing in fertility and women's health. In this podcast, I talk with and to mature, restless, questioning, and creative women who always make their stories a particular chaos. Let me know what you thought of this episode by leaving a comment, and take the opportunity to click the follow button here in the description of this episode. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn as Noemia.Caos and Noemia Colonna. I would love it if, in addition to listening, you shared this podcast with a woman who you think would relate to these stories I tell here. That way, we can spread the seed of beauty, maturity, and boldness of fantastic, older, more experienced women like Lynae, and yes, purposefully chaotic women like we both around the world. See you in the next episode.